In January 2012, the Lincoln Park Historic District was designated as a National Historic District and placed on the National Register of Historic Places, thanks to current and previous residents, along with City Councilman Andre Knight. So, exactly what does that mean? The National Register of Historic Places is the nation's official list of buildings, structures, objects, sites, and more worthy of preservation in American history and culture for their significance. Lincoln Park's importance stemmed from the reason it was built. Established in the 1940s, Lincoln Park was an area that catered exclusively to blacks during a time when there was segregation and when there were few homes, hotels, and places of entertainment for African Americans. In fact, Lincoln Park was the first planned subdivision for African Americans in Rocky Mount. It also included the Lincoln Park Hotel and Restaurant. Here was an opportunity for blacks to own their own homes and to get great food in the community. Plus, it was an opportunity for those visiting to stay in a clean hotel without being discriminated against. Today, learn more about Lincoln Park and learn from those who know it best.
My name is Moses Brown, Jr., and I was born and raised here in Lincoln Park. So the first 18 years of my life, I grew up here, right here at this house, 812 Leggett Road, and I was, we call this the original Lincoln Park, because all the houses was on this side of Leggett Road. What I'm sitting on now was the original part of the original Lincoln Park. And then later on the other side, we always called that the new Lincoln Park, because that's where all the brick houses and everything were As a child, growing up and everything here, it was one of the best places to me. You know, we had, everybody had nice houses. We had the river. You know, for kids, we fished in it every day. You know, if we didn't fish, we threw rocks and stuff like that in the water. And everybody, like I said, we had the first two African-American police officers. Both of them stayed here in Lincoln Park. And so we didn't get in too much trouble, you know, because, hey, you got two policemen here, you know, so, hey, but a lot of the professionals here were teachers, school teachers. A lot of houses had both parents were school teachers. You know, then we had doctors. Dr. Armstrong stayed over here across the street. We had postal workers, barbers. My father was a diesel mechanic at Merida Bakery, and he retired. That's where he retired from. Just truck drivers, you know, business owners, you know, that owned grocery stores. Stuff like that, and you know, we just, it was just, and we had something to look up to. You know, you had role models. Seemed like everybody here was a role model. You know, you just kind of looked up, like, I've been growing up and looking across the street at the doctor, you know, and Miss Armstrong was a 12th grade English teacher at Booker T. You know, so Miss Tillman was a teacher, English teacher, and her husband was a police officer. Miss Chase, her husband was a police officer, and she was a school teacher. So. That's what I'm saying. You had a lot of that here, so you looked up at these people, you know, as role models, because they were, you know, they were that's just the way it was growing up.
We have lived here since 1964. We bought the two lots across the street, and we built and moved here. And I had a little mixed emotion first about the motel being here, but after seeing how nice Mr. and Mrs. Pittman were, we felt very good about building here. Well, it was so important because that's where our dignitaries came. Mahalia Jackson and so many other dignitaries came and stayed here because they couldn't stay in the white motels. So I do have a list of Governor Hasty, Mahalia Jackson. I have a list of famous folk who came and stayed here. At that time, we could not go to a white motel to get a room.
Actually, the neighborhood back then, from what I remember, is pretty much the way it looks now, although they were actually homeowners, and I think when people own their homes, they take pride in the way they look, the yards and upkeep. So it was, you would never drive through there and see trash. You wouldn't see people's yards unkept, people's houses not painted. So that's it. Other than those things, the neighborhood pretty much is the same. Now the restaurant and motel, I would not say looks the same. There is asphalt now where there was actually just dirt. There was grass. There are houses now where the barbecue pit was, and the motel rooms were kept up. On the inside, when you walked inside, there was a long counter with stools. There were booths, and then there was a separate room that was called the dining room. And in there, families could go and sit and eat, sit at the table and eat. That also served as a place for receptions and different meetings for organizations. So it was really a hub of activity then.
Segregation did affect. Well, we had some. We had it, not some of it. We had it. You know, I mean, that was the times. Lincoln Park. Everybody. I ain't gonna say everybody, but majority of the professional people moved here. You know, in Lincoln Park. Now, all our houses was brand new. You know. And our houses were just as good as some of the white people that were staying in Rocky Mount at the time, you know, because they were brand new. All the houses was brand new. Like I said, it's still a good area for people to stay. You know, you can't beat it. You know, a lot of these houses, 2 bedrooms. That's what they were. You know, my family was 5, but it was Daddy kind of spread us out. So when when I got time to go to the military or get out, when I graduated in '67, then I just moved on. You know, went into the military, and Dad had added a couple more rooms onto the house. So because we had 2 girls and 3 boys. And a lot of these houses, people are added. Some of the people still added on Elson Drive right now.
Everyone really embraced the Lincoln Park development and later the Lincoln Park Hotel and Restaurant managed by Clarence Pittman. There were many stories told about the Pittman family barbecue and the hotel that attracted visitors and celebrities.
My father and my mother owned the restaurant and motel for 23 years, and my father sold it once his health declined. Initially, they were managers, and eventually they bought it, so they were actually owners by the time he sold it. But my father was 36 years old when the restaurant opened, and the motel opened in 1953. My mother was, well, she was 36 as well, and they had never been in this business. My mother went to Virginia Beach and took courses in how to set up for a dinner and things like that. My daddy basically did the ordering of supplies, and he cooked the barbecue only. That's the only thing he cooked. My mother helped cook the other foods. And in the restaurant, they sold fried chicken, beef stew, pork chops, as well as the barbecue. Those were the basic meals. They also had hot dogs and hamburgers. And at that time, a hot dog was 15 cents. I do remember that. And you could get a hamburger for 25 cents. And initially, when the barbecue sandwiches were sold, they were 25 cents. A pound of barbecue, you could get a pound of barbecue for $1. So that was the price of things back then. My father was not an educated man as far as academics goes, but he was truly an educated man as far as common sense and knowing how to treat people, and he had been he was a business owner even before he started with the restaurant and motel. He co-owned a cab company in Rocky Mount, and it was the Pittman Bullock Cab Company up on the block. So he had some business experience even before he started here. Well, it was good, first of all. Secondly, it was an old family recipe, and it consisted of only 3 ingredients, and people don't believe it, but he only used vinegar, salt, and red pepper. That was it, along with the meat. And I think what gave it its flavor, he cooked it on an open pit, and he used wood. He would burn the wood in the fireplace, take the ashes from the wood, and on top of the pit was tin. He would place tin on top of the pigs, and then put the ashes on that tin, and that's what cooked them. And the oil and the fat dripped down into the pit. And he hand chopped it, and he seasoned it. He was the only one that basically did the barbecue. In the 1950s, there were no accommodations for black people. And since Rocky Mount was right on at the time it was 301, corridor from north to south, when people came through either going north or south, and especially north to south in the wintertime, people brought their maids and their chauffeurs, and there was nowhere for them to spend the night. And I think if you look at your map, Rocky Mount was considered halfway between New York and Florida, so this was a good stopping point. But there were no accommodations for their maids and their butlers and their chauffeurs. Oftentimes they would stay in other people's homes. So there was a real need for a restaurant and a motel that accommodated African Americans at that time. Celebrities came for almost the same reason. If they were traveling, I think they used to call it the Chitlin Circuit, they had nowhere to stay either. So this was a good stopping point for them. And only two I remember hearing my parents talk about frequently was Mahalia Jackson and B.B. King. And I don't think they were passing through. I think both of them were here in Rocky Mount to perform, not here at the restaurant, but in the area. In the very back of the restaurant was the storage area. That's where the supplies were stored. The sodas, everything, the supplies were there. And because I was an only child and my parents didn't leave me home alone, that was my playhouse. I had all kinds of things going on back there with my dolls, and that's where I would be a good bit of the time when they were working.
Well, some of the memories I had at that time when I believe my mother started working there in 57 or 58, and I had just graduated from high school. And so my Uncle Clarence, told me, he said, well, you want a job? And I said, yes. So they asked me to come to work in the evening time, being a waitress and stuff. You look around, the people were so closely knit. And in the evening time, when they get off the job, they would come there and eat their supper and just sit down and talk, about things, and it was just like a closely knit family. And I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed some of the banquets that they had there. And one more time I remember, they gave me a surprise birthday party there, and that was a moment to remember. And it was just so many memories, just to see how the people come together and they love one another. It was just like one big family, the whole community.
And so during that time, when people would travel from up north going south, they had to either sleep in their cars or sleep with their relatives. And the Lincoln Park restaurant motel actually had, I think, maybe 4 or 5 rooms that people could actually have a safe environment that they could travel and they can stop by and get motel or reservation with their families and not allude to driving all night or sleeping, pulling in a rest area, sleeping in their cars. And we do have a postcard that said that this is an exclusive colored motel with the different amenities that the hotel, had bathrooms, heat and air, those sort of a southern comfort living. And so that during that time, it may seem difficult for us to believe that, but during those times, we had to succumb to the way how life really was, and that was one of the accommodations. I think it was might have been another motel. Wright's Chick Shack was one on Raleigh Road, and I think it might have been some or one or two on 301, because we didn't have 95 during that time. And so, and then they would get Southern cooked food. People up north missing home cooked greens, freshly picked, field peas, corn, and and that barbecue. So during that time, that brought some kind of sense of dignity to African American, that you can have a nice place to dine, and then you can have a nice, fine place to take your family, so that you can have rest during your travel. So those are some of the things I think the restaurant played a part during those turbulent times during the civil rights movement. During that time when Mr. Gregory was building the motel, he wanted to make that appeal, selling the lots, the houses that we see around now to African Americans, and also the idea of having fine dining in motel. It was a lady by the name of Isabel Knight Davis. She was a gospel singer, and she was the songbird of the East for Church of God in Christ. And so the story that was told by Mr. George Davis, he visited the Holiness Church, and he was looking for somebody of that same character of Mahalia Jackson. And he went to this church, and he looked in the choir, and he said, well, give me the one, the big mouth one, the loud one. And so he asked her to come and sing on his broadcast. And while he was advertising his insurance company, his real estate, and this development, she would be in the background singing gospel music. And I remember, I think the grand opening, or soon after the grand opening, she was featured outside Lincoln Park Restaurant and Motel, actually singing. But during that time, you had to actually go into the studio and sing. It wasn't you didn't have CDs or track tape that you can play, but she actually sang while they were doing their advertisement, and she was singing that good old Southern gospel music. And so, and that was he was a very smart businessman, and so that really got the attention of people, knowing what was really happening in this new subdivision, this new development, and this new restaurant that was coming to this area.
When my mother first started working at Lincoln Park, I was in high school just before I came out of high school, and I never thought that, the restaurant would, be recognized that much. I know in that day and time it was very popular and famous, because people from all over the United States came there just to buy the barbecue that my Uncle Clarence, made.
I think most, not only did I enjoy the barbecue and all the food, Mrs. Pittman always said that she prepared the food in the restaurant just like she would prepare it at home. But I think one of the things that I appreciated most, that we could come here and sit down and eat a hot dog. Usually you had to go to Charles, stand up, buy your soda, and eat a hot dog standing up in Charles. Do you know where Charles? Charles was a store up on Main Street near the train station.
Okay, and it was segregated? Or?
Surely. So we had to stand up, drink our Pepsi, and eat our hot dogs standing. So here we could come and sit and relax and eat a hot dog or whatever. And not only hot dog, Mrs. Pittman went out of her way to prepare the very best food. Fresh collard greens, backbone. You know what backbone is?
Yes, ma'am.
Backbone and just a complete meal. And she did the very best when it came to making pies, potato pies and different kinds of pies.
I didn't know at the time growing up, but now that we know, it was an African-American neighborhood that people could move in a what we call a nice neighborhood. You know, and like I said, we had all professionals, a lot of professionals here. You know, different people from different backgrounds, different jobs, but they all stayed in Lincoln Park. The kids, we had a lot of kids in Lincoln Park. I had kids, a lot of kids in my age. We had kids 1 or 2 years above, 1 or 2 years below, and so we always had people to play with. You know, growing up and everything. So, and just knowing that, you know. This is where the people that we knew, like I said, the role models and stuff that we looked up to and everything that came out of Lincoln Park, because, you know, a lot of people look at it, you know, you from the South, you from the country or whatever, you know, but hey, I know we stayed a lot better, lived a lot better than some of the people up north, I can tell you that.
I remember sometime on some occasion, Uncle Clarence will take me into the pit, you know, when he cooked the barbecue and show me how he cooked it. And sometimes he would let me help him chop it up and show me how to season the barbecue. He said, I want you to watch closer than that, because you might be doing this one day. And so I was, you know, very attentive to watch him to see how he would, you know, to make that good old barbecue.
As you can see, those who know Lincoln Park best have fond memories of the Lincoln Park subdivision and the Lincoln Park Hotel and Restaurant. But what about the people there?
Mr. Davis, he was a kite flyer. You know, he used to fly box kites, and never seen box kites. You know, and he would take it and tie it up in the vent in his attic, and it would fly all night. You wake up in the morning, the kite still be up in the air or whatever, you know. You know, so you know. And he was a skater. Mr. Davis was a skater. He skated till he was 90-something years old. That was in the telegram. He was skating out at the skating rink out there too. He was 93, I think. He could skate. He used to skate all around Lincoln Park. You know, skate in parades and stuff like that. You know, he was a person that you remember. My daddy, I was just talking about Mr. Pittman. My daddy and Mr. Pittman and Mr. Hatfield, that used to own the store on the corner up here. It's called Oak Tree. It's called Oak Tree now, but it's called Mr. Hatfield then. And my father and them would play checkers there at night. You know, Mr. Pittman would get off when he got through at his place. They would come up there and just play checkers and have a beer. You know, we'd be in the park. There used to be the baseball park was right across the street, right up here. And so when I was growing up, like we had a lot of conveniences. I walked to all my schools. I walked to elementary school, which is Baskerville. I walked to J.W. Parker, which was a junior high school at the time, from the 7th to the 9th grade. We were the first group that went there. I actually was one of the first group that went to Baskerville, and then we went to Booker T. So I walked to all my schools. You know, we never had to catch a bus or anything. They didn't have buses in this side, to tell you the truth. The buses came from people like way over in South Rocky Mountain. They bus them over to this side. But we were already here. So we walked to school every day, you know, until we got old enough, you know, somebody to drive, you know. But, you know, hey, that's just where it was.
I got to meet a lot of people that I didn't think existed. I got to meet a lot of them, and it was just fun talking to them, fun serving them. And it surprised me because, you know, I'm black, and I was black then, I'm black now. But it surprised me that the black people, not only black people, some whites too, we had about 3% white, participated in it and tried to help our business out. I had white customers too, but mostly, you know, it was about 80% black. And they patronized me real good, and they enjoyed the food. And I listened to them. I gave them what they wanted. And that was plenty barbecue, plenty fried chicken, chitlins, stewed beef, or you name it, we had it. And any fish. You remember my friend Buck Lennon? I don't know whether you remember him or not. But he'd come down, he and I would sit there in the front there practically every morning and have a cup of coffee. Buck Lennon was a black baseball player, Hall of Fame. He's already in it. He was my friend, and we got along just like brothers.
The children, we have a son and a daughter, Gregory and Karen O'Ree, and they would come over and eat hot dogs after I had fixed a full meal. But the Pittman family was really a family. My husband retired from the United States Post Office in Washington, D.C., and he came here to live with he had a massive heart attack. Mr. and Mrs. Pittman, at least Andre's grandmother, and Mrs. Pittman walked across the yard and just stood. I had gone to work at the O.R. Pope School, and my principal said, "Come home," and he brought me home. My husband had fallen dead, and just after coming home for being retired for 8 months, and our son was here from Winston-Salem State for the Christmas holiday. He was in the bedroom fast asleep, so it was quite a shock for him to wake up and find his father on the floor dead. So my principal brought me home. First, we went and got our daughter from senior high school, and he brought us home. But when I got back, Mrs. Pittman and Mrs. Marjorie, Andre Knight's grandmother, were standing at the front door waiting for me. And then not only did they do that, they prepared a whole dinner for my husband's postal workers. About 10 or more cars came, and they closed the motel and served a full dinner. The friends enjoyed so much that they didn't leave. We had an 11 o'clock funeral. We were closed shortly after that. We came here, and the friends enjoyed so much they didn't go back to Black Dog, to Washington, D.C. So we had a very good relationship.
My father was killed in a car accident in 1984. And after that, there were just so many people that came forth and talked about how he sometimes would allow them to eat and they didn't have money. They could pay him later, or just the good things he did. And so things that I didn't know about. I knew he was a good man, and I loved him, but I was totally surprised at the number of other people who came forth and told me that once he passed away.
Vanette Woods says she didn't realize how she, her father, and her mother were so much a part of history until the day that Lincoln Park received their marker and National Historic Designation. Many people were proud that day.
Well, I was very pleased, and I know we had worked hard over a period of time since we was out here, and we were very proud of it, and I was very proud to be the owner of this. And I was young enough at the time to get around like I was 10 years old, you know, so I hung right on in there.
How did that feel? Excited, proud to know that the community was able to qualify for the as a historic district, and just the history behind the Lincoln Park community. It was the first planned African-American community development for blacks during that time. And so, you know, it has a lot of history that people really don't know too much about. You know, so I'm glad that we were able to record that and make it known for years to come. It really happened around Miss Elizabeth O'Ree kitchen table. Prior to that, Rudolph Knight had showed me a footprint, a drawing of Lincoln Park, and he asked me, you know, he showed me this picture. He said, "What do you think this is?" It was sort of like a, not a spoon, but maybe a horseshoe sort of type. And he said, "That's Lincoln Park." And he began to say that was the first planned development, housing development for African Americans. Then I began to tell him that my uncle and my grandmother actually, you know, ran the restaurant. And the stories about how she used to, she was the head cook there, and people used to come from, especially up north, just to get that cooked, pit-cooked barbecue and fresh greens and desserts, the peach cobbler, things of that sort. And so then we began to meet around Miss O'Ree kitchen table and decided to, you know, ask staff to look into it and see if we could make it a historic neighborhood.
When I found out Lincoln Park was going to be on the National Registry, I was excited. It was bittersweet because I would love for my father to have been here to receive the recognition, but I was thankful my mother was able to be here. It gave me a good sense of pride, and I think I said that day, until I started meeting with the people from the city, I didn't realize how important it really was for the community as well as for Rocky Mount, and how significant and historic it was. Well, I hope people who were not a part of the generation when the restaurant motel was actually operating, I hope they will be excited that it was chosen for the National Registry, and I hope they will take pride in the Lincoln Park district and learn the history. That's the important thing, that the younger people learn the history and appreciate it and continue it. I think the fact that the Lincoln Park area where the homes are still pretty much is intact, although there are not a lot of original homeowners. I would hope that the people that live there now would take pride in their area and resolve to keep it up.